As we speak, the California legislature has gavelled in to a special emergency session of its legislature. And you might say, well, of course they have. LA is burning to the ground right now. But it turns out that's not actually what this special session is about. No. The legislature has gavelled into a special session called by Gavin Newsom to provide millions of dollars in funding for filing lawsuits against the incoming Trump administration. That is what their priority is at this very moment. Mr. Speaker, there could not be a starker illustration of the abject political failure that has gotten our state to this point and that has served to bring about the horrifying scenes that the whole country is seeing on their television sets right now and that folks in Los Angeles are suffering through. So I want to go over a few of the failures that have gotten to us to this point. But I do want to say first that my prayers are with the people in LA, the victims of this horrifying, apocalyptic set of fires, with the over 100,000 people under evacuation orders, with the at least 5, sadly probably more people who have lost their lives and their families, and with our firefighters and first responders who are working around the clock, doing everything they possibly can to get this blaze under control. And I'm truly grateful for all of the communities in California and across the entire country who have come together to try to help the LA area in this hour of dire need. Thank you. It is appreciated beyond measure. But after we do manage to get the fire under control, there are going to be a lot of questions that need answering. Indeed, we can already identify, even though we don't know the specific cause of each fire, the failures that we know have contributed to these conflagrations, these catastrophic events that have hit our community time and time again. Our politicians have obsessed over things like banning lawnmowers, banning leaf blowers, all the while neglecting our forests and leaving our communities vulnerable. In fact, when it comes to the forests, it is worse than neglect. The state and, frankly, the federal government have put up unnecessary hurdles to doing proper forest management, to clearing vegetation, to doing prescribed burns, which has turned many of our forests and areas adjoining residential areas in many cases as tinderboxes and caused fires that have, in many cases, become truly catastrophic, community-destroying events. And we've seen it happen, sadly, time and time again. The perversity of it all is that these restrictions on being able to manage our forests, which have decimated the timber industry, by the way, are imposed in the name of the environment. But nothing could be worse for the environment than a catastrophic wildfire. Indeed, when you look at all of the emissions that are saved by every single emissions reduction program that California has, all of that gets wiped out many times over when you have a catastrophic wildfire. So there simply could not be a more backwards policy. And in fact, last year in the fall, a decision was made to halt prescribed burns. Now, we don't yet know if that would have made a difference here, but we do know that the lack of doing prescribed burns in a systematic way, in an efficient way, in a timely way, has contributed to this problem. To make matters worse, Governor Newsom, when he came into office, started claiming that he was doing forest management, but he wasn't telling the truth. An investigation by Capital Public Radio, the local NPR affiliate, found that Newsom had exaggerated the amount of forest management work that had been done, the number of acres treated. He'd exaggerated that number by a staggering 690%. So our political leaders in California have allowed millions of acres to become overgrown and have thereby left our communities in a vulnerable condition. Not only that, their mismanagement of our water supply has, among other things, diminished our capacity to respond to wildfires. First of all, it has been decades since California has built significant new water storage, not since the State Water Project. And secondly, even the water that we do have, when it comes down, much of it gets diverted intentionally into the ocean, again, supposedly for environmental reasons. I can tell you that in 2023, when we had record storms in California, I visited the site of the Folsom Dam, and you had water cascading out of the dam, 10,000 cubic feet per second, almost all of it going eventually into the ocean. And at that time, by the way, we had a flood emergency declared, of course, and yet somehow we were also still under a drought emergency. Californians were told you're not allowed to water your lawn. The legislature was passing draconian restrictions on indoor water use to 25, 30 gallons a day. Businesses were banned from having lawns in front of their property. In some parts of the state, you had to have a low flow device for your shower head. And then they would punish you if you used too much water when you took a shower, if you didn't take a 5-minute shower. And all the while, we're sending staggering amounts of water into the ocean. And we're failing to build the storage that would actually catch the water and preserve it for when we need it. As yet another example, relevant to the situation in LA, the California Coastal Commission actually rejected the building of a desalination plant just a couple of years ago. So California, over the course of many years, has in a political way chosen to allow its forests to become overgrown and to impose artificial scarcity on its water supply. At the same time, our state and many of our municipalities, such as Los Angeles, have had completely backwards priorities and have demonstrated a total failure of just basic competence when it comes to government performance and the provision of services. And that was highlighted very clearly in this case, when you had the Los Angeles Fire Department telling the city, do not deprive us of our funding. And yet the city decided to do it anyway. The fire department said that the reduction in funding would severely limit the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies. Now, as the city council, the mayor, were deciding not to fully fund the fire department, they had plenty of time for things like passing a resolution reaffirming Los Angeles as a sanctuary city. It was already a sanctuary city. It's already a sanctuary state. But they decided that was their priority, not to prepare for the risk of wildfire, not to fully fund the fire department, but to pass another resolution making itself a sanctuary city yet again. And we'll be learning more, I expect, about how it possibly could be that we have fire hydrants that are not working, that water isn't coming out of them, and how we didn't have the necessary personnel on hand despite the high wind conditions. It all serves to underline, on the one hand, the misguided priorities, and on the other, the lack of basic competence. Additionally, Los Angeles and California, more generally, have continued to lead the nation in homelessness. California has roughly half the unsheltered homeless in the United States, and there's a whole host of reasons that this is not a good thing. But one of them is that encampments tend to lead to a lot of fires. In fact, in just 1 year, in 2023 alone, there were almost 14,000 fires related to homelessness. So again, we don't yet know exactly what caused the set of fires that are still ongoing, but we do know that this city has been as bad as any in terms of letting homelessness proliferate, allowing encampments to grow unchecked, and thereby creating more dangerous conditions for its residents because of the risk of fire. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I'll point out that California has an insurance crisis that has been growing and growing and growing year after year after year, and our state's political leaders have simply allowed it to happen. They've done not nearly enough to mitigate the risk of fire that is the underlying cause of the increased rates. They've done essentially nothing until recently to stabilize the situation, to stabilize the markets. And as a result, you have insurers that have now pulled out of the state entirely, millions of people who are losing coverage. In my district, you have whole communities where everyone has lost coverage. And they're kicked to the California Fair Plan, forced to pay 3 times as much, 4 times as much, 5 times as much as they were paying before. And the Fair Plan is now on the verge of collapse, accounting for the absolutely catastrophic losses that we're seeing in Los Angeles. So, Mr. Speaker, what is happening and is still ongoing, sadly, in Los Angeles is a truly unimaginable tragedy in terms of the images that we're seeing, in terms of the dislocation that it's causing. But I expect that we will learn that at least to an extent, it was an avoidable one. And this should serve as a major wake-up call, that our state needs to start doing things differently, that we need to get back to basics. We need to get back to basics in California. Build our roads, manage our forests, store our water, maintain our grid, fund our police and our fire departments, do the things government is supposed to do them well, and do nothing else. If we can get back to basics as a state, then we can stop catastrophes like this from happening in the future. And perhaps someday, in the not too distant future, we can start leading the nation in the right ways again.